The views and opinions discussed on this show are of the guests and host. They do not reflect the views or opinions of associated sponsors or affiliates. Sudden alteration in belief systems, moodiness, and confusion are natural side effects of listening to this podcast. Enjoy at your own risk.
It's the Oddtonewfoundland. Ghostly greetings from your host, Jonathan. Mysteries, ghosts, monsters, and lore. East Coast esoterica and so much more. If it's odd to your friend, it's on the Oddtonewfoundland.
Hey oddballs, welcome back to the Oddtonewfoundland Paranormal Podcast. I'm your host John Mallard and I'm bringing you back with some more fun. So glad to hear from you again. Happy New Year to you all. This is the first guest interview I'm doing in 2023. Where the heck did the time go? I mean, this is a question we've asked ourselves really since the beginning of time. But let me tell you something. When it comes to time, if you want to save a little bit of time and you're a fellow podcaster such as I, highly recommend tonight's sponsor, Accusonus. I've talked about these guys for the last 2 years because they've been just the most generous sponsor to us, giving us everything we need to make me sound way smarter than I actually am. That's right. With a mere turn of a knob, you can change your audio to a more crisp and beautiful thing. And I want to talk to you a little about something. Get out of your comfort zone, just so to speak, with Accusonus. Have you ever thought about making an audiobook? Imagine you can make your own audiobook and Accusonus can make you sound like a superstar. How cool would that be? I know I'm a big fan of that. And someday I might even have my own published book as an audiobook. But that's beside the point. I want you guys to give Accusonus a chance. I want you guys to check them out. They're down in the show notes. Okay? Accusonus, remember, is software for your computer that works with Audacity, Adobe, all kinds of great stuff in there. One of my favorite things to use is the voice leveler. I'll be honest, I got a weird voice. You guys know I had some voice problems, especially since this time last year I was in a coma and I got intubated. As soon as I woke up, I had a raspy voice. I don't have the powerful voice I used to have before that. So, Accusonus saved my butt because it makes me sound just as loud as my guest is be. And sometimes I got to lower the volume of my guest to match mine, even though that doesn't happen very often now. What's really cool about it is that it's just a mere turn of a knob. No complex stuff needed, taken care of and done quick and easy. Once again, guys, check out Accusonus down in the show notes, and we'll get right to our guest. Let me tell you something. The world is full of possibilities. It really, really is. Nobody really knows anything, but we got a lot of really cool theories. And one of the theories that everybody seems to agree on is the Big Bang Theory. You know, recently we've looked deeper into space than ever before, and it seems to have us searching for answers deeper than ever before because what we found isn't exactly, well, what we thought we would. Some people turn to spirituality in uncertain times. Throw a little pandemic on there, and suddenly you got people looking through the Bible. Once again, I'm so happy to have said, and I'll say this again on my podcast, that I am a spiritual guy. But, you know, I can't help but shake the feeling that whoever is the author of this thing certainly did their homework. But how on earth did they know the things they know? Now, this might sound strange to somebody who hasn't read the Bible before or isn't even close to it, but Genesis alone is literally a word-for-word, account of how our universe came from something infinitely small and infinitely dense, okay? This is a step-by-step thing. How the heck am I supposed to reconcile all this stuff and still go about my day? Well, that's where tonight's guest comes in. That's right. Tonight, I am so fortunate to talk to Andy Grell. Now, Andy is coming on my show. He's actually been to Newfoundland before and reached out to me about some of the more paranormal subjects he likes to cover. And I know he's going to be a little bit controversial, but you know what? We invite that in. I want people to message me and tell me how how much they love what Andy got to say, or even how much they hate what Andy got to say. Because let's be honest, it's all about how we feel and how we interpret everything. But what if I told you his interpretations of some of the things found in the good book might keep you up a little late at night? Andy, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
I'm not as happy as I am.
It's a little tough presenting what I have, because a lot of people don't really want to go for it.
Well, I got a really interesting audience, Andy. I got a really, really interesting audience. They're very smart. They're very intelligent, but they're also very open-minded. And I think that's a very important part. So go ahead, lay it on us. Let's chat a little tiny bit about what's going on. What is happening? You wrote a paper, you sent it to me, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so interesting. I have to have you on my show. So let's go ahead. Tell me a little bit about where you're from and how you got into, well, really kind of finding the weird stuff in there being the Bible.
Okay. I'm from New York, born and raised. And I was always a Bible fan. I'm Jewish, and so I don't know if you know this. The entire Torah is read throughout the year. So, up to my bar mitzvah, I was immersed in that, and so I just loved the stories. Sometimes I didn't believe in them. Sometimes I thought they were hokum, but I always liked the stories. And at some point, and this was in 1994, there was a baseball strike. I don't know if you remember that. And,
I was only in grade 4, Andy.
All the men needed something to do, and they started picking up politics. And one of the political things that was going on was to teach creationism in public schools. And when I heard about that, I really went monkey crazy. And so I started using my arsenal of Bible knowledge that I had, plus whatever reference materials I had. I have I established the 3 timelines in Genesis. So the first one is the order of creation, with a universe coming into existence at a 0 point in time, composed of space, matter, energy, and time, which is basically what we see today. So that's a fact from Genesis. It went that way. It's something, everyone has, a lot of cultures have their own creation myths or creation stories, but some of them, like the Greco-Roman stories, have titans floating around in a chaotic state until there's cosmos, there's order to them. A lot of the Native American tribes have pre-existing gods that do stuff, that have been around forever. But the Genesis story is
take your time with it.
It has the exact order. So that's the first day of creation, and it's interesting that the text says that it was evening and it was morning, a first day. And as it happens, in fact, before, Yehior, before Let There Be Light, it was absolutely dark. The physical cosmology of the universe, it took 600,000 years of darkness before matter was cool enough to have photons escape.
absolutely right. And just to kind of bring all of our listeners up to speed there, what he's getting at there is Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And just to kind of reiterate there, we're getting basically a timeline right away. In the beginning, that tells me right away that's when time began. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So we've got, something coming from something infinitely dense and infinitely small, which, by the way, has never happened before and isn't repeatable. So will always be a theory for Big Bang, right? This is quantified as infinite. There's nothing infinite. We've proven that. I jump in with the science mind there right away. But what's really, really interesting is something you mentioned earlier, because, the universe did not come from the mouth of some primordial monster, nor was it the offspring, something that defied beings or whatever. It's instead depicted here as a true creation in the modern sense of the word, which is something that I kind of just latched on to what you said there. Anyhow, I'll let you continue on. Go ahead, Andy.
Okay. So we're talking about the timelines, 3 timelines. So going over the, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. If the universe is known or assumed to be 14 billion years old, each day of creation would be about 275 billion years, per day. So as it falls out, so here is the order of creation. All right. We talked about the first day, let there be light, then the origin of the universe at a 0 point in time. The next thing is what really knocked me out, and I came late to the party on this. This is the firmament, which separates water, which is a fluid, below the firmament from water above the firmament. And as it happens, the way that solar systems form, they start with planetary disks, and then planets form, and there's a viable solar system. But everything in space is always revolving around something. So in this case, particularly for planet Earth, our solar system and planet Earth, that's revolving on something. So, and I know you know this, John. You're in Newfoundland. You're in the Newfoundland Sea. I've crossed the Newfoundland Sea myself. And so there's a bow shock to the solar system. We're heading counterclockwise at some point, and so just like a regular boat, there's a bow wave, and according to the Voyager probes, both Voyagers, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, when they left the bow shock, it's also called the heliopause, either way, when they left into interstellar space, but still giving telemetry back to NASA, what was found out was that the plasma level, high-density plasma, was 50 times. The plasma is a fluid, by the way, just in case anyone doesn't know that. The plasma level is 50 times what it is over the bow shock than it is under. If that firmament, right, in Hebrew, for anybody who wants to know, it's called a rakia. Without that firmament, we would basically all be either toast or living in caves underground, because we'd just be burnt to shreds.
And to kind of elaborate just a little tiny bit there and help people out there who might not be familiar with the Hebrew side there, people back then, to them, the universe was a relatively small sphere with a hard outer shell or firmament, like you mentioned. And we all thought the earth was at its center back then, right? The firmament itself was filled with tiny holes, though, and through which then the divine light would shine through from the stars. So what Andy's trying to say here is that, once again, there's a timeline here and how things came to be. The stars, not necessarily came first. There wasn't necessarily the light. There was the firmament, right? So that's really interesting. That's really interesting, because how the heck would somebody know that back then with no scientific instruments whatsoever? Like, how is that even possible?
Exactly.
It's brilliant. But not only that, it's extremely paranormal. I have no idea how anybody would ever know that unless there was either A, divine intervention, or B, maybe an even more ancient civilization. But even then, there would be traces of something. So, wow. Continue. Sorry, I'm just nerding out. I love this stuff.
Okay. So the star of the next few segments is nitrogen. There's no life without nitrogen. Nitrogen is very necessary for life. So in day 3, and here we go, according to the Big Bang Theory, the autotrophs began to dwindle. Okay, autotrophic life is created. So what had to happen is that there had to be a period of what's called third generation stars, the original stars that came up. So those stars were little bits of hydrogen and helium would come together, and then they would gather, the gravity in that would gather more and more and more until there was enough hydrogen, helium, and lithium for the weight of that to ignite into a star. So that's the regular astrophysics. And just to make sure, in order to get nitrogen, the population 3 stars that I just mentioned, the original star, population 3 stars, when they only lasted maybe 50 million years. They were short-lived, and they would go nova almost immediately. And when I say almost immediately, that's, for universal time. And there has to be the right kind of star. You get solid material blown out of the population 3 stars, and then you start getting what are called dwarf stars, which the sun is one of these dwarf stars. And so, how would someone writing in 2500 BC know the real order of that? And so what I use as a stand-in is I just call it a special phenomenon. A special phenomenon of some kind, which I'm totally neutral on. I don't know what it is. I don't have a guess. However, it's possible to find out. I believe that it's possible to find out. And that's where the paranormal angle of what I have is the paranormal angle is what you have to look at. So that could be, I don't know, comparing people's miracles, looking at, going from like in my case, at one point, there was a parking space angel where I live in Manhattan, and it's very impossible to park. And a friend of mine gave me the name, this complicated name, in case I ever really, really needed a spot. And so that, I had to promise not to use it unless it was an emergency. And So I never used it. There wasn't an emergency, and now I've forgotten that name. And maybe one day I'll remember it. But it's things like that, things that defy the law of large numbers, things that just happen. But we're getting out of the scientific stuff. But it's just a possibility if you analyze enough miracles, or what people are saying miracles, that's a door open to possibly finding out what's going on. But now I'll get back to the scientific portion. So once we have enough nitrogen for autotrophic life, that's about 8 billion years ago. And that's an observed fact. All right. Maybe not on Earth. There's not an Earth yet. But it's possible somewhere in the universe that there is autotrophic life. It's possible.
I would think it would probably be, I mean, I got to agree. To be honest, you either have a choice with regards to science. You're either going to believe in a deity who intelligently created everything, or you're going to believe that, well, aren't we ourselves repeatable data? There has to be life out there because all the building blocks of life are out there. And just to throw this out there to everybody, we are yet to create life from nothing. We can't take inanimate atoms and molecules, whatever you say, and throw them together and zap it and make it come alive. We can't do that. We still haven't figured that out yet. So, there's always going to be room for God, but once again, to jump right in on the science part of that, like you mentioned, it's...
Well, in the 1950s, there was an experiment trying to cobble together life, putting the enzymes and the catalysts all together in test tubes and beakers. And the biochemists found what they're calling myceles. So it's kind of like a proto-cell membrane, but it never got to the point of actually creating self-reproducing life.
What a beautiful concept what a beautiful concept that perhaps this could very well be right in front of everyone's eyes back then. The science and religion need each other. Science and spirituality. We literally have the shell for a cell, but we can't put the guts into it, so to speak, and that takes the creator. And I think that's where we meet on that, which is why I couldn't wait to talk to you. I almost feel like we had to get this first part of the podcast out there for everyone to hear, because me and you have got a lot to agree on here and a lot to question, really. And rightfully so. I mean, we literally have no idea what holds us together. We still don't know what the heck gravity is, although we have found out that we have waves of it now. We still don't know if it's a push or a pull. We can't figure it out, although most evidence would point towards both, which makes, once again, no sense. And yeah, like there's a lot in science that is not explained, and people just scoff at as, oh, it is what it is. And I don't know. I can go on for hours about the holes, so to speak, in so many things that people hold as really its own religion, because we don't know. And I love to pick your brain. Yep, go ahead.
John, I question everything.
Yes.
That's my job. As a fraud investigator, that's my job. I question everything.
You should.
Whatever it is.
And
I do.
But the thing is, like, it takes somebody with courage to stand up and question those things sometimes too. And that's why I love about the paranormal. Even though it's literally not normal to think this way, and yet should it not be what we're out there to do? The true scientist, okay, is somebody who's out there looking for how things work. And I'm sure you can agree with me on this one, Andy. Like, our current model of physics is not working anymore. We've gone as far as we can with it. And the wonderful thing about science is we just keep adding. Do you think that the issue we have here is, once again, going back to that big old toe, that theory of everything? Like, do you think that might be what's going on there? Once again, we know so much, but yet so little. Is it that?
Well, we all cheered for the Higgs boson.
Yeah.
But if I recall correctly, they thought they found the Higgs boson, but there were 2 lines rather than 1 line. So I don't know the status of the Higgs boson now. It's a little out of my area. But we find stuff all the time, and what science is all about is you put your nose to the ground and you question whatever it is that you're looking at, and that's science.
You might be the only person on the planet who I can ask this next question to and actually have an opinion on it, so I'm kind of excited. Okay, so here it comes. I had this thing in my head where, what if we took almost pretty much every story in the Bible and just looked at the black and white of what's in there and just ask some science-based questions. So everybody knows that the whole Noah's Ark thing, like, oh my God, how is that even possible? If you only had 2 of every animal, everything would be, well, horribly, horribly deformed after a couple of generations. But, like, what is your thought on Noah's Ark being more than likely something genetic that survived? Like, do you think we might have a weird interpretation there of what went on for real? Although we do have great floods documented.
Well, yeah. This is to me. I think the Ark, without having like in the elephants and kangaroos, like something sort. I agree with you in one thing that the flood. Well, you're at one end of Canada, and on the other side, on the Pacific side of Canada, there was something called the Spokane and Missoula floods, which started as glacial lakes, and I think they call it the Shield of Canada. So literally, so let me give you for instance, the Sumerian legends about the flood. It was a week of rain, and everybody was flooded out, and then the gods came back down to earth, and then the people had to feed their gods. But in this scenario, literally, it didn't start with rain. It started with a groundwater flood. Like I say, it's like Alberta, British Columbia, Washington State, Oregon. A lot of that present topology and geography was a factor of those glacial lakes literally bursting forth from the ground. And then so how does someone know, writing 2,500 years ago, that instead of just a rain event, that it really was the fountains of the earth bursting forth? So, I mean, there's enough of these to really try to trace it. And I spend a lot of my free time updating this material, and I think bets with myself about what's going to be discovered. And in fact, one of my favorite bets I had with myself was crossbreeding in the Nephilim. If everybody is a fan of the Nephilim, I am sure everyone in your audience knows about the Nephilim. So there was, in fact, a cohabitation period, about 35 to 50,000 years between Europe and the island of Gibraltar, which was the last stand of the Neanderthals, according to a guy named Clive Finlayson, who is the scientist in charge of these caves where humans and Neanderthals lived, maybe not in harmony, but lived together. And sometimes it would be all human, Homo sapiens, sometimes it would be all Neanderthals, but it was those caves that was the last stand of them. But they were there. And so everyone walking around today who does not have African roots has a clade of mitochondrial DNA, the L, M, and R clades. That's a technical thing. It just describes what kind of DNA is going on. It never hit Africa. So apparently in the field, we never got that far south. I'm not an expert on that, but people can do the research at home. If there was open, like Ancestry.com and 23andMe, if those databases were open, people could really establish how much Neanderthal genes are in any particular person or in a group of people. So these original people that had this L3 clade of genetic information, at some point during one of the ice ages, it's called marine isotope stage 2, you were basically able to walk from Somalia to what is now Yemen because the water level was so low. All the water was locked up in glacial ice. So again, that's how people writing 2,500 years ago. How did they know that?
And like,
I could go on. I could move to a different timeline if you like. So I mean, we're pretty much the roots of Earth and humanity and what we know begins in these 6 steps, these simple 6 steps. There's also There's also something that's out of favor. It's called deuterogenesis. Now, a lot of people have the question, right? If God made people on the 6th day, along with the last thing that was made on the 6th day before all the other animals, if God made people before then what's going on in a couple of chapters ahead, where it says that God collects dust. They're calling it dust, okay? But he's collecting material from all over, different types of material. And then he fashions Adam from that quote, and I'm using air quotes here. You can't see me, but I'm using air quotes.
mm-hmm.
That he's constructed Adam from this particular genetic material. And then when it's time to have a wife, he takes, so people say it's a rib, all right? In the Hebrew, the actual Hebrew means God would have taken material from his side, probably the hip, which is where a lot of the stem cells are. There's a lot of stem cells there.
Oh, wow. That's really fascinating. I never heard that before. That's really interesting. That's really interesting because, I kind of always wondered, like, why was it the rib? But, like, it could have been a misinterpretation. And that is really interesting. I never, ever thought stem cells would be coming in. This is just a fascinating conversation. Please continue, Andy. Sorry, I had to jump in there.
Yeah, the weight is more. So not only does he create Adam, while he's in the process of God, air quotes again, he puts Adam into a deep sleep. So, show of hands, audience, if someone's doing a surgical procedure and the person is unconscious, does that remind anybody of anesthesia being used?
As someone who was on propofol for 2 weeks, exactly a year from today, actually, I was halfway through my coma. I know exactly what he's getting at. What he's trying to say is that a deep sleep means that he can't move to be able to have a surgery performed on him. He's literally talking about the anesthesia there, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Interesting. Yes. Okay, keep going, man. This is really cool.
So anyway, this is called deuterogenesis. Nobody likes the name anymore. It used to be something, but it's really fallen out of favor. So the deuterogenesis has a lot of good stuff, but it doesn't have a formal timeline. So this is the part, the word deuterogenesis means second creation. So this is the second creation. So in deuterogenesis, what we have is Cain and Abel, those stories. We have Cain, in addition to getting his the mark of Cain, he is the first person in a book of literature to build a house. Excuse me. He founded the land of Nod, and at that point, along with Enos and Enoch, and I may have those backwards, but forgive me, I'm a little foggy. That was when, according to the Bible, that men began to call on the name of the Lord. So even though Cain was a bad guy, I guess he was pardoned, and then they started organized religions. So that's one part, that's a critical part of Deuterogenesis. And this goes from Eden to Cain to Tubal Cain and the roots of civilization. But it also has reveals. And it parallels the timeline from Adam through Seth to Shem, Ham, and Japheth when there's the flood. But as I say, there's no dating, so we don't really know when what happened. So we don't exactly know when the flood was. But we can see in the text of Genesis that there are two people named Lamech. So Lamech was Noah's father, but the other Lamech was the guy. The other Lamech was the guy who invented plural marriage, and he was the guy that killed somebody for making fun of him. And he boasted that he wouldn't be punished because Cain wasn't punished. So this is what we call background information, but it's basically the beginnings of civilization, starting to be able to use tools to build stuff, and then of course at the end of this is a lot of people call it the curse, but technically in the Hebrew tradition, it's a blessing that God gives to Adam and Eve. And it is a fact, that Adam and Eve in the garden were naked frugivores. They weren't wearing clothes, they were eating fruit. And then along comes the serpent and mixes stuff up, and all hell breaks loose. But the key thing in this blessing that God argues out of the need is that, the blessing is that human females will no longer present estrus. So, animals go into season. So, human females don't go into season. They can have pregnancies and relations at any time, and have children without having to go into heat, to going on that process. But also accompanying that is that God promises a painful birth. And I pondered that for a long time, why painful birth? And what my research found out is that people's Homo sapiens hips, because they have bipedal locomotion, the hips are narrower. And because the brain, even a fetal brain of a baby, is larger than for other hominins. If you know the word hominin, it's any of the earlier types of almost humans, or including us, so we're all hominins. But moving on. So due to the narrow hips and the big brains, there would in fact be at all times at least some chance of pain during birth. And again, how does anybody writing, all that far long ago would know something like that?
And not only that, it's actually hinting at evolution there a little bit as well. And, I just love to pick on Darwin anyway. I can't help it. I got to pick on him a little bit here, but look, we got the conventional thing of Darwin, and he came to conclude that since humans were the most advanced of all creatures, our appendages, must be the most specialized, right? But yet here we are, the most general of generalists that ever existed in the history of the planet. Instead, humans are unique in that we are the ultimate generalists, man. Well, carnivores are mostly sharp, sharp teeth, cutting teeth. Well, and herbivores got those grindy ones, We have more or less a distribution of both. We're perfect. And rather than growing in a specialized angle as in other animals, human teeth grow straight up and down. And here's the really kicker. I think God is in our hands. I really do. Because, well, they're probably the most generalized appendages when compared to the rest of the animal kingdom. They do not allow us to run faster or climb trees or provide bigger claws with which we can kill our cows or whatnot. Features, the evolution, it kind of shows the environmental conditions are thrown out best for humans. There's something else in the driver's seat for us as we evolve, because they are literally universal and non-specialized. Our hands, to permit us to perform a wide variety of stuff, man. A wide variety. And they're not essential to our survival at all. So, once again, there's something else in the driver's seat as opposed to evolution. And I think that in what you just spoke to me about, the idea that we are literally going to describe birth before it happens. And listen, I'm sure that we can now say epidurals are us playing God. Because we're taking away the pain a little bit. But that doesn't stop the pain from going on for a long, long period of time. A lot of women are laid up for 6 weeks, which is kind of unknown for a lot of other female mammals out there who aren't laid up at all, but only come into season every now and then. That is an incredible piece of knowledge you shared. I like that one too. I never really thought on that. I love learning new stuff, man. I really do.
Okay. So shall I move on?
Yeah. I just got to jump in there, man, to show you I'm still interested and still listening. and kind of interested in your take on some things too. So you continue on.
So anyway, I have I have a series. Now, this can get a little longish, all right? I have a series of what I'm calling the main timeline, the meat of Genesis, where events happen alongside the name of a particular patriarch, and so you know who's doing what. There's an event. And so, for example, one of my favorites is the flood of the famine of Joseph. So, as I'm jumping ahead here, but the famine of Joseph was a direct result of something called the Torah event. It was a volcano north of Egypt and west of Asia, close to where Italy is now, and it just blew its top, and it messed up the weather for years, many years. And in fact, if you're anywhere in the top of Africa or the bottom of Europe and you start digging, you'll probably wind up with a layer of tuff, Tuff, from that volcano. But that's not the only volcano that's likely to be referenced in Genesis. But also, I'm going to go backwards now for a while. Adam and Eve on the way out of Eden. So any of your audience that is hit, chapter and verse, word for word, will know that on the way out of Eden, God sewed jackets for Adam and Eve. They needed clothes. They had them naked. They had fig leaves. Then they had leather coats. And why would there be a need to have animal hide clothing in a hot place like the top of Africa? And the answer is there was an even bigger volcano, one of the biggest volcanoes ever known. It's in Lake Toba. Now it's a lake. It was a volcano. It was a mountain, Mount Toba. And it was like maybe 5 or 10 times the size of the Santorini that the Torah is. And it almost started an ice age, but not quite. But a lot of places started getting really cold and were hot. And that was a major contributing factor in getting the heck out of Dodge, because if it was cold in Africa, you really had to get away from it, because the people then really didn't they didn't know anything but their own ecosystem. So I believe it was actually cubic miles of ejecta coming from that. And also, just like the Santorini event, if you dig down a particular geological layer, you will find the total tuff from that event. And it's just, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Sorry, John.
It's okay. I'm gonna fix it in post. You do your thing, man. You're doing great.
Okay. So it's just another thing that happened. And what I'm calling these bits of information, I'm calling them out of place information artifacts. And I'm calling them like that because they're information and they're artifacts, but they're out of place. This is the theme, was no one would know. I mean, people would be current on the Santorini event, but no one writing 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 years ago would know about Tova, except there's one possibility. If some group of people had managed to find a durable means of record keeping, so almost every tribe, almost every culture, no matter how advanced or not advanced, almost every culture wants to keep track of their people. They want to keep track of their culture and their people's stories. And if some group had a method of having durable records like that, that would be a possible answer to how all this really, really old stuff managed to get into the relatively newer stories in the traditional Bible. So that's a thing. So anyway, I'm just moving down the page here.
Take your time. Don't worry about it. I got it all tagged here. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of all of it later. Do your thing.
So here's something that I really dug into. About 20 or so years ago, there was a theory that Homo sapiens emerged in several different places. And I'm holding my hands out now. And it's just, for whatever reason, I just took exception to it.
How could you not? Like, to me, like, the biggest joke ever told was, the idea of a missing link. There are thousands of missing links, man. Anthropology is one of the just so, I think it's an abused science. I really do, because I've never come across something that's been written as gospel, pardon the pun, as evolution with regards to human beings, because they talk about all missing link when there's thousands missing, thousands. But anyway, keep going.
Well, I can tell you, this is I can go ahead a little bit. If you're talking about continuing evolution, and this continuing evolution in what's called adult lactase persistence. So I know some of your audience may be lactose intolerant.
Yes, that's the first thing that popped in my head. Yeah.
But this is the opposite of that.
Yep.
So there was something called in what's now the Netherlands, a gene developed where adult people could digest milk and other dairy products. And that started to spread. And then at the same time, other genetic variants came up in the Hijaz, where like the top of Saudi Arabia is now. People were drinking camel milk. And eventually they were able to tolerate, adults were able to tolerate drinking the camel milk. So there have been a number of studies about this, especially a very large article in the Times about 6 years ago, to demonstrate the fact that humans are still evolving. And I found that to be absolutely fascinating. Well, actually, what was fascinating about it was that somebody realized it was happening, because scientifically, geneticists should know that we're continually evolving. If that makes any sense to you.
It does make a lot of sense to me, because one of the most laughable things about Darwin is he said that we were the be-all, end-all. It was his theory that we are the perfect being, quote unquote, which couldn't be farther from the truth. In fact, we're incredibly wimpy compared to most other beings, especially when it comes to a disease and stuff like that. Like, we're incredibly fragile, maybe because we're so complex, but like, I don't know, man. There's lizards. You can cut them in half and they'll still live. You can cut off a cockroach's head. It'll live for 6 weeks. Like, we get a cold, okay? A bad flu, okay? We're done. Our core temperature reaches too high or too cold. We are the Goldilocks in this place. We're dead. Like, not to mention our biggest flaws, which are literally, we are one of the few species on the planet that actively kill ourselves at all times, not just for resources, but because we feel like it. There's not many animals out there that doesn't kill, because of intelligent reasons. Usually it's territory, mates, that kind of thing. But there's like billions of us, and we're going to wipe out thousands of each other every day. So there's a lot of credence there, and Darwin couldn't be farther from the truth. Although he did no doubt discover evolution is a thing, it's not the be-all, end-all. And the fact that we're still evolving, I mean, just look at technology, how technology has become a part of us. We're so generalized in our evolution that everything's a bonus now. So, like I look at us like, oh my God, like how long is it before our eyes get way bigger because we look at screens? How long is it that before we don't store body fat like we do now because we're no longer nomadic and might not eat for 3 or 4 days at a time? Like, how long is it before we evolve those things? And I just hope and pray we don't wipe ourselves off the face of this planet before that happens. I really do.
Well, John, I'll tell you, you're in Canada. I don't want to get political, but I don't know if you've been following the news in the United States.
Yeah, not so much, but once again, I do keep up a little bit of stuff. If it's big stories, I'm probably listening to it. Go ahead.
So apparently our Congress can't decide on who should lead the Congress. Right?
Yes.
The Speaker of the House. And so this has been going on for days, and nothing can get done. I think they're into the 12th round of trying to pick somebody, and we're not going to be able to pass bills to pay people. It's just really ridiculous what's going on there.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to maybe it's paranormal. Maybe Congress.
Well, I don't know about paranormal, but I think it's a beautiful. I just see the duality there when you literally had a president who was in place who was just a very aggressive individual, and now we have someone who's aggressive in different ways in there. And now we have a Congress with no one on the seat. It doesn't surprise me there's no one on the throne right now. Listen, this has been a weird 5 years anyway. I'm not surprised. I'm just happy that there actually is a Congress. Look, they're going to figure something out. Unfortunately, as hypocritical as this might sound, they might have to dig into the old religious bag of tricks and maybe have some people name somebody. This is unprecedented, though. This is unprecedented. I know what you mean. It's very scary to know that there's no one in Congress right now, and who can steer the ship, so to speak. We have all the mouths and all the minds and no leader, and that's a scary thing for sure. Especially when there's war on the doorstep with Ukraine and Russia and stuff like that. Like this is a scary time, man. Very scary time.
Well, one of my other passions. And I started this in 1972, 1973, the American oil shortage in 1970, the winter of 1973. And I was a kid. I was in junior high school. And there was no computers back then, so you had to look stuff up in something called the Reader's Guide to Periodic Literature. And I did as much research as possible in alternative energy. And I got some results. I corresponded. I was a kid. I was like 12 or 13. And I would correspond with these scientists, and they would answer me back. And I thought that was a lot of fun. And I'm still into that. I'm still a strong advocate for alternative energy.
Oh, well, you're going to be real proud of Newfoundland then, because we just signed a massive land deal to open to tender for the isthmus of our island. I don't know if you remember this or not, but the Avalon Peninsula has a very small isthmus that connects us to the western part of our province. You can basically see the ocean on either side of you. That's a rarity, okay, with a place with, well, really, we're the third windiest place on the planet, so it only makes sense to have wind turbines, but now we're actually going through with it, and it's like a big deal. Like, this is going to create a lot of jobs and a lot of renewable energy, and I'm just so glad that there's something new coming, because let me tell, if you ever heard about the boondoggle, which is Muskrat Falls, here in Newfoundland, what an absolute nightmare. A failed attempt at a renewable energy source. But I digress. There is definitely interest there and definitely some alternative thoughts. We're the third windiest place on the planet, man. Newfoundland should be like powering itself by wind realistically. And the issue becomes the infrastructure and the batteries. But I think that, you give it enough time, we're going to come up with the technology for all that. It just starts with powering a town. Then it starts with a couple of towns, and then you move on and create. And but even if we had a couple of turbines in every city, just to take the pressure off, even just healthcare, for example. Imagine having our healthcare off grid, so that no matter what, there'll always be power at the hospital. I think about it that way. It doesn't have to be the entire town or a world, so to speak. It could be just the ultimately essential things. You know what I mean?
It's funny you should mention that. In the 1920s, and I just can't remember names, dates, and places, but I believe it was called Vortex, and it was something. It was an architect that constructed this building. It was an early skyscraper, and it had kind of like a conch shell. That circles around the side itself. Mm-hmm. So it was built on it was put on top of the building. And so any wind would provide energy to a turbine, and so it would power all the electricity for the whole building. And I think it lasted a few years, but it got blown off in a storm, and it may have done some damage. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what happened to it, but people have been thinking like that you should, in fact, and I live in an apartment building in Manhattan, and we have solar panels all over the roofs. And I figured it out. I actually have a negative carbon footprint.
Right? Like, think about that. Like, and another thing too, like, don't get me wrong, we've done everything we can to create things to save on energy, but we've really only started to think about replacing our resources with other technology. And I think what it is, our infrastructure is so heavily based on oil. Absolutely everything runs on oil. The government runs on oil, everything. If we were to change it, I think it's the fear and the money involved more than anything that keeps us from having a wind turbine and a solar panel. Fun story. So, and I'll leave you with this one to make you feel a little happier about that endeavor. There are people in Newfoundland right now who are going off the grid completely, who have access to absolutely everything, including internet, and it's all solar panel, and it's all personal wind turbines that you can now buy online and hook up to your roof of your house. The wind and the solar at the same time, charging your main generator / battery to keep it all going at your house. So it's out there, mainly because it's really cold here. And if something was to happen, like we had a major disaster here a few years ago with Snowmageddon, where we had almost 100 centimeters of snow within 24 hours. It was a disaster. The military had to come dig us out. Nobody had power. Like, it was absolutely insane. And then we had a pandemic shortly thereafter. Like, one of the first things that's going to go if the world goes to shit, so to speak, the first thing to go is going to be the energy grid. So I don't know, man. I'm feeling like a doomsday prepper here with you now, Andy. I really am. Better get my canned tuna in order.
So, you know, I ride a bicycle. I get everywhere by bicycle. I have arthritis, and one of the things that helps the arthritis is gently riding my bicycle back and forth to work.
With me, I work from home, so I wouldn't be able to have that luxury. And Newfoundland, it's so friggin' cold here half the time. You might be able to do that for the first few months of the year. But as soon as you get into January, February, man, you are one cold dude on that bicycle downtown. But people still do it. I see them going, man. There's snow tires for bikes. Did you ever see those before? Big, thick tires?
Yes, I had to give it up, but I had a collection of interesting bicycles, including one that was good for the snow.
Pretty cool.
Had, little skis on the side.
Interesting stuff. Well, Andy, it's been really interesting talking to you. I'm going to make sure I link your site, your book, where people can buy your book. We never talked much about the goats, okay? So I want to give you a little chance to kind of plug your book here now, because a lot of your beliefs and ideas and stuff like that are kind of segued into the characters in that book, who just so happen to be, goats. Tell us about that book and where people can buy it.
Okay. The title of the book is Scapegoats, the Goat Protocols. The setup for the book is that the book of Leviticus describes in the desert near Mount Sinai, the high priest of the Israelites every year would select 2 goats. And all the people of the camp of Israel would go to one of the goats and put their hands on the goat, and the goat would receive the sins of that person for the year. And then when everybody put their sins on that goat, they would shove the goat out into the wilderness. So the conceit of my story is that eventually these goats, year after year, become telepathic. And they form a union to induce people to do good stuff. And the more good stuff they do, the less their burden of sin they have to carry from the original people that didn't sin. That's the setup. I think it's kind of funny, kind of humorous. I think you'll learn something from reading it. And so once again, it's Scapegoats and Goat Protocols by Andrew Paul Grell. If you read it and you like it, let me know.
I'll be sure to link that for Amazon, guys, in the show notes as well for Andy here. And, the premise of that book sounds really silly, but at the same time, after talking to you for the last hour, I'll be very interested to see which of these goats represent what. And I cannot wait to read that book. It's going to be great, man. I'm totally going to get a copy for myself. Is it an ebook or is it the hardcover?
It's like trade paper.
Okay.
Trade paper kind of book, and but it's also on Kindle as a download.
Oh, perfect! I love that. I'm a big fan of my ebook reader and stuff like that. So, yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. I'm going to link the show notes. I'm going to get myself a coffee too. And I just want to say a sincere thank you to you for coming on this show. I love this conversation. We went all over the place, and those are always my favorite ones to have. The best paranormal discussions are the ones about science and things that are stated. So I love it. I actually do, and I really, really appreciate you coming on, Eddie. I really do. Thank you so very much. And is there any passing thought or notion you'd like to share with the audience before you leave?
You know what? I'm going to tell you this. All right. So slightly a little bit long. Again, for your Bible fans out there, Moses was on top of Mount Sinai, and this is the time when God put his head and passed over Moses, and Moses was gleaning when it came out, and there was a conversation with God, a little uncharacteristic conversation about about goodness and mercy, and Moses asked God, "What is this holiness business?" And so, from the text, the biblical text of that conversation, rabbinical scholars through the years boiled it down to this: holiness is to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to raise up those who are bowed down, to comfort the mourning, to visit the sick. And that's what holiness is, according to the rabbinical scholars. Make of that what you will. So do good stuff, everybody.
That's right, guys. Do good stuff. Don't forget to check out Andy's book. Guys, listen. Wonderful conversation, Andy. You take care of yourself. Bye now.
Okay. Hope to speak to you later at some point.
You will, sir. Take care.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, the time to say goodbye is upon us. But don't worry, you can keep track of the Oddtonewfoundland Paranormal Podcast very easily. It's available on Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, and TuneIn Radio. Just look for the Oddtonewfoundland Paranormal Podcast banner. Of course, if you'd like to keep up to date, you can always check out the Oddtonewfoundland Paranormal Podcast Facebook page, drop a like, and every single time a new show goes up, you'll be notified. You can also follow me, John Mallard, on Twitter at ODDTONFLD. That's Odd to Newfoundland. Get your latest news on the podcast as well as the ever-popular Parajoke of the Day. From the oldest city in North America, I bid you adieu from the Odd to Newfoundland Paranormal Podcast.